remembers GeoCities? Thank you. Yeah, okay, because you're older. No, I'm just kidding, me too. No, actually, I was thinking about this the other day. I love GeoCities, and I actually remember that was one of the first times I really got started. I actually remember going to my first coding boot camp in 5th grade. My mom sent me to an HTML class every summer. And I literally thought to myself, when am I ever going to need to use this? Because I just wanted to go to soccer camp like all the other cool girls. But I went to HTML camp and theater camp every summer. And so now I give talks on dev stuff. Very telling. So this talk is your first 100 devs. That means, what does it look like to bring on your first 100 developers onto your project? If you guys have any questions for me, feel free to DM me. If you want to have the slides to this talk, it is also pinned to my handle, so you guys can access that at any time, anywhere. So who is this for when you're thinking about your first 100 developers? Oftentimes, this talk is kind of relevant for solo developers, if you're a new developer tool, or if you're already a startup or a project that is looking to release a new product or go into a new channel. Maybe you are experimenting with an open source platform play, but you don't really know what that market is going to look like for you. This is really helpful to keep in mind. So why me? Why do I love talking about this stuff? Like I said, I got started pretty young, but at the end of the day, one of my biggest passions in life is providing resources and opportunities for those who want to create. I'm a child of immigrants. My parents, they immigrated here from Taiwan, and they said, I remember my mom saying this to me. She said, well, I never had an opportunity to learn this stuff, so I really want you to learn so that you can come back and teach me. And so at a very young age, I realized that teaching others is just a really empowering opportunity. And not so much teaching because I'm a professional or anything, but just, hey, here's some knowledge and I want to share this with you. If I don't know the answer, here's the community that can help you out, right? So I just love talking about this because I think it's really empowering. So what you're going to learn in the next 15, 20 minutes is really 5 things. One, I'm going to help you identify what your tribe is, specifically within your audience. Number 2, I'm going to help you guys think about what that success metric is going to look like, especially as you're bringing in your first 100 developers. Number 3 is one of my favorite, is the rule of 1%. You'll learn a little bit more about that. 4 is, what does that inflection point look like for when you're bringing on the developers? And number 5, an acquisition strategy to really consider, especially as you're starting early on. Now, build it. Will it come? Oftentimes as we're making developer tools, we think if it's highly functional, if it's really the perfect solution, they will come. However, like the premise of Bob's Burger, they have this awesome restaurant and they're there working every day, except no one really comes except that one guy. Does anyone know the name of that guy? Yeah, I don't actually remember, but yeah, he's just kind of like Teddy. Teddy, that's his name. Teddy is his name, right? So besides Teddy, he really doesn't have a lot of traffic, but Bob's Burger is still well loved. So number 1 is thinking about your tribe, right? Your tribe, what does that mean? Oftentimes you hear, the marketing team, they're like, hey, know your audience, understand your users, audience, right? But right now, I'm talking about your tribe. Because often we say, oh, especially those who are not as experienced, they're like, oh, we'll just market to developers, right? Well, developers is kind of too vague. It's like saying I'm just going to market to Pokemon. There's 8 generations now. There's north of 800 types, right? So there's only some that we really care about. Does anyone know who these are? Yep, yeah, but which generation? Thank you. Who's your favorite? Goldine? Goldine is your... Okay, I've never heard of that one before, right? Right, so on the top of Goldine, I'm dying. On top of Goldine, you want to also understand what is your tribe, because within Pokemon, it's very vast. There's different types of Pokemon. right? But within your tribe, you love Goldeen. You know what? Goldeen is the water type, right? And so even within Pokemon itself, it's like, you know what? I really want to just target the water type Pokemon, especially the ones that can do like ice moves, right? Like ice move, ice move, ice. That's their stack, okay? So that's something to consider is really have one tribe in mind, because they're going to be your biggest fans. They're going to love you the most. And just so you know, there's just really different types of developers, and they're reached in different ways. They live in different communities. And for some, this is funnier than others, right? Yeah. See, this is also relatable if you're not a dev. It's still pretty funny. But, you know, I keep rallying on having just one tribe to focus on first, because something you really want to leverage is the 80-20 rule, right? So 20% of the people are going to bring in 80% of the business. Now, what that means is, sure, you're going to have tons of developers or fans on your platform, but there's going to be that subset of freaks who's just going to like ride or die with you. They're going to celebrate you. They're going to use your platform. They're going to contribute back, right? So I'm going to bring back an OG example. Who remembers this? Yeah. I'm surprised that I remember this, right? So Red Hat, what they do is they build enterprise solutions on Linux. And of course, that means this is open source. You can access this. And that was what was so revolutionary with Red Hat, because they were able to provide this open source, and they wanted to ensure that they reached a mass of people. But they also ensured that, you know, we're going to bundle this up and deliver it to you. And back in the day, you know, it was $49, right? But nonetheless, only some of them paid. You can still access the free one, but you also get like installation guides, how-to manuals. This is before like forums and Q&As and, oh man, like dev docs, those days, right? So they wanted to ensure that the most people got access, but those who paid, it also drove, you know, most or all of their revenue. So step 2 is to think about your success metrics. You know that you're looking to bring in devs. You know you want to identify your audience. But you also want to figure out at what point do you want to achieve the 100 developers. Oftentimes, when you're working, especially in small teams, it's like, oh, we'll have this date. You know, oh, gosh, we need to move it to that date. And sometimes what I've also seen is people just say, oh, I want to have a bunch of developers, or I want to grow a dev community. I'll come in and be like, all right, when? They're like, whenever. And I'm like, no, it's like saying I'm going to get married. When? Not whenever, you know. Like, you got to plan for it, right? So pick a date, just one date. Don't have multiple ones, because if you just pick one date, you're going to be hyper-focused, right? And then now pick one of the milestones that's going to be really important for you. Now, I don't know what your project is, but different milestones or actions is going to have different meaning for your project, right? So maybe it's followers or impressions, right? If you're a fairly big company like Google, all they really care about is like, hey, brand awareness, you know, that's going to be really, really important for them. That's going to be a clear return for them. Now, if you're a smaller project or a team, maybe impressions aren't as useful in the early beginnings. Maybe if you're a dev tool, you know, downloads are really important, and you really just want to make sure you have installs, right? Or if you're already monetizing, maybe you want to have paid users. I think charging a nickel would be really funny. You should try that out. So for this example, we're going to go with the metric of downloads, right? So this is going to follow out through the talk. Step 3 is the rule of 1%. This is actually really straightforward, and it's quite surprising because I think a lot of people miss this a lot. So let's say, again, we want to have 100 developers for your project, and that means we're going to have a 1% conversion rate. So the rule of 1% is if you don't have benchmark metrics yet, if you're first starting, or if you're already established and if you already have users. However, maybe, again, you're starting an open source project, something else, and you haven't migrated them over yet. The go-to rule of thumb is that 1% conversion rate. And again, with this example, we will do installs, downloads. So you said, all right, I want to have 100 downloads. What does that look like? If I just have 100 developers, Is that enough? Are they here for just the pizza? I don't really know. But if you think about the user journey, right before the download, it's like, we have to get signups before they even download. So if you work backwards, right, 10,000, 1% is 100. So you think, all right, I need to have 10,000 signups just to get that 100 downloads. And what's the step right before the 10,000 signups? Oh my God, right? There's a million. That's not how math works. But if you imagine, there's like a zero, and if you're real sad, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, over this to the, oh wow, okay, I'm distracted. But as you can imagine, it's 1,000,000, 10,000, 100, that 1% conversion rate. So when you're thinking about, I need my first 100 developers, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I might need my first 1,000,000 impressions. Now, bear with me because it almost seems unattainable, right? And just as a reminder, this is only if you don't have any previous cohorts or users or consumer base, right? So forecasting your metrics are really important. As I mentioned before, you really want to pick a date. And oftentimes, if you're going to a project, you want to think, all right, we want to try to acquire 100 users in the next 3 months, in the next 2 months. So what does that look like? I mean, this is really simple, is really breaking down to ensure that you're on track. Every day, 300 impressions, 400 impressions, 300 impressions, right? And now again, a million is really far out. If you look at your industry, some has either higher or lower conversion rates. 20% is an industry benchmark, 19%. But the rule of thumb, again, is that 1%. And what also helps is having an ability to identify when that inflection point might come to help you catapult yourself from just having a very stagnant growth. So number 4 is inflection point. And this is something that I'm going to cover with a case study that I really enjoy. So as we know, Airbnb, they provide housing, right? Housing opportunities, housing options, especially as you're traveling. And for the most part, you're going to have a fairly consistent need for housing. It's, there's always a price battle, so on and so forth. And what they saw in the early days was that it was quite consistent. What they really leveraged, though, when they first began, was there's a huge Salesforce conference. And when the Salesforce conference came, there was a huge influx of people coming, right? And for them, this is really their leverage, their inflection point. If you remember, Uber did the same with South by Southwest. In fact, when Airbnb first launched, they actually launched a TechCrunch, on the TechCrunch stage. And yes, they got a little pickup, but their audience really wasn't there since, TechCrunch, there's a lot of local folks as well, or in the area. But Salesforce, you have a mass of people coming in. So what that means is, as you're thinking about growing your users, what is the inflection point in your industry? It might not be a conference. It could be something online, perhaps, like huge inflection points, so like 40, Forbes 30 under 30. I mean, whatever that event is. It can also be just different Reddit AMAs, whatever that may look like. So at that time, then there was a huge spike in demand, and they were able to provide multiple housing options, and that's really what catapulted their traffic, right? So something to really consider is identifying your inflection point. Number 5 is your acquisition strategy. So as you're beginning, there's tons of ways to approach this. And one of the things that I hold true and dear to my heart is something that Paul Graham said: do things that don't scale, especially if you could afford to do so. Why this is important is that when you're doing things that don't scale, that means you're usually very hands-on. That means you're deeply interacting with your users, your developers. And if it's only 100 devs, I feel like, at least in my mind, it's a little bit more tangible. I feel like it's not as horrifying to approach. And I wanted to make sure that our team really ate our own dog food. I mean, so much so that we named our project after a dog. So what we are is we're a developer community where you can learn different resources and also mentor one another. Developers just go on. It kind of looks like a Stack Overflow for now. And as you know, because we're online, we thought, OK, we can definitely drive traffic this way. However, if we are going to do something that doesn't scale, and we don't really exactly know how we're building out the rest of the roadmap is, we are doing a series of meetups. We're doing a series of mentoring sessions, 7 sessions to be specific, because we really want to sit down and understand what kind of developers are we even trying to help out, right? And although this is super expensive and it's a very long and painful road, having just maybe 3 sessions, we can get at least 100 developers. And so that becomes actually a lot less intimidating when you're thinking about, is it 1 million impressions, is it 10,000 signups, whatever that looks like. Because at the end of the day, it's just really important for us to understand what our user is and how do we iterate from that experience. It's almost like an IDEO approach, right? So with that being said, here are the 5 things that we covered today, was identifying your tribe, what kind of personality, identity folks are within the developer community you're looking for, because hobbyists are very different than those who work at enterprises, perhaps, or perhaps even startup developers, or even freelancers. Number 2 is thinking about your success metric and just picking one and being hyper-focused on that one just to get you to the 100 dev mark. Number 3 is the rule of 1%, which is fairly easy math, but it's a grinding work, right? Number 4 is identifying that inflection point that's going to be quite important for your team, your product. And then number 5, an acquisition strategy, something that doesn't scale, especially if you're starting off early on, because it's a lot more forgiving. It's also very community-oriented. And then lastly, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I've been growing communities for about 6 years now, and I just really, really love helping people. And again, if you really enjoyed this talk or you found it very useful, you can go ahead and share it with your communities. The talk is pinned onto, I think, the first pinned post. Also, I'm going to be really dramatic because, OK, bye, hold on. I am the worst because I totally forgot my stickers. If you like the sticker, I only have one. So Battle Royale, no. But if you retweet it, I will hand mail you, this is doing shit that doesn't scale, I will hand mail you with like hearts to your address, and we will send you stickers. And if your friends retweet it, we will send them stickers. If they're a bot, then I don't know how to figure that out. But yes, who wants the sticker? Okay, I saw your hand first. Oh my gosh, okay, you were also really excited though. Like you were first, but she was like, okay, do you guys want to? No, it's okay, they can have it. All right, also the talk is over, thank you.